Sumthin Sumthin, welcome to the Underground Society podcast, man. How are you?
I'm doing great.
You have such a long history in making music. Can you just kind of give me like a rundown of kind of how you began to get into music?
My grandma had like this old baby grand piano that was out of tune, and I would go and I would just bang on the thing. Like,
I know you went to Icon, you graduated from Icon.
yeah, once I got there, it was like Hogwarts.
I also heard you got kicked out.
I'll be straight up, like right before Icon, I took a heroic dose of psychedelics.
It seemed like your whole life you were supposed to do music, bro.
The pressure, the pressure.
That's so fucking easy to burn yourself out in this industry. Do you like meditate or do you journal?
Scientology.
What am I doing here?
Just sit down, close your eyes, and think of everything.
Doesn't it make sense you sit there with your eyes closed for like 10 minutes?
When you feel that, like truly, it's magical. You're like aligned actually with this universe. Dude, you are a fucking raccoon right now. Like, look at your eyes. Okay, you're definitely on drugs. Holy crap, how did this happen? You know what? I can't do this. I don't do this for the industry. I do this because I love it.
Sumthin, welcome to the Underground Society podcast, man. How are you?
I'm doing great. How about
Fantastic.
yourself?
Good. Really good. I wanted to
Okay.
start off this interview by first just thanking you, man, for being here. I've been listening to your music for so long, and it's an honor to have you on the podcast today. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, man.
You have such a long history in making music, and you started being interested in music by the time that you started walking, really, back when you were a little kid. Can you just kind of give me like a rundown of kind of how you began to get into music? Were your parents in music or anything?
Sort of. So like, there's two different sides. There's my dad
Okay.
and mom. They were never married or anything, so it was like
Got it.
two different areas of influence as far as the music world is concerned. And when it came to my dad, he was the one who brought me to like live shows and concert, anything where we're, spending money to go just check out some dope bands and stuff. And
Right.
back then, or I mean, he still is now, he grew up, his prime was like in the 80s, so he's super into like punk and that kind of vibe. Coming from Southern California, punk rock was huge back then. So I got to see some pretty rad old school punk bands when I was like
That's
4 years
dope.
old, and he'd like bring me in the
Hell
pit
yeah.
on his shoulders, and I'd run around. He'd like use my shoes as weapons.
Kick people.
So yeah, exactly. So yeah, I was going to like Warp Tours and stuff really young, and just seeing like a plethora of different stuff there. And then on my mom's side, she has the actual like musical talent.
Mm,
So that whole side of my mom's family, like my grandma and then my great grandma, they could all play like piano and guitar and stuff. So when I was really little, same time, 4 or 5, when I'm starting to like develop memories and stuff, my mom would just, sit in the living room and start playing guitar. And I remember thinking as a kid, like, there's only 6 strings on there. This math doesn't make sense how she's
yeah.
playing so many different chords, or like, how does this make sense? Because every time
Dude,
I strum,
I tried to learn how to play guitar too. I literally couldn't. That was my exact same question.
but yeah, it sparked this weird curiosity where I was like, oh, like, you know, I was submersed in music, but didn't really know how to play yet. And fortunately, I was kind of like strumming around on guitar, but I didn't really like it. But my grandma had like this old baby grand piano that was out of tune. And she kind of just had it as like a decoration little piece in her apartment. And I would go and I would just bang on the thing, like hammer fist when I was young. And then eventually my mom was like, okay, dude, you got to stop doing that.
Yeah.
And sat next to me on the piano bench and taught me this like very simple, just like minor arpeggio where it's like ba da da ba da da. So I started doing that, and then just playing that like same arpeggiator over and over and over, and started realizing I could move that from like this part of the keyboard to this part of the keyboard or
Mm,
piano, whatever. And then my brain just kind of exploded, like, oh, whoa, like at such a young age, I was starting to like take the concept, okay, now I have this arp, I can move it over here. And if I go from this to there, that's like a cool progression. And then I was starting to
right.
slowly write songs by ear just from like that one first little thing my mom, gave me. And so I guess like I kept playing and playing and playing. I was obsessed with it. And eventually my mom got me like an electronic keyboard, and I really dove into it. And she got it because it had like a headphone jack, so they'd never hear me practicing or anything. It was just like nice and quiet, So I set it up in my room, and I think around like 10 years old, I was actually starting to write some pretty cool like pieces. It was just compositions, it wasn't singer-songwriter stuff yet. It was more like I don't know, yeah, just like piano
Piano stuff.
and instrumentals. And
Right.
from there, my mom was like, "All right, well, let's get you some lessons," which was pretty dope. So finally I got to, like hone in the skills and blah blah blah. But I go to that teacher in the first year. He tried to get me to start sight reading and, just get that skill under my
Right.
belt and get all the music theory down. But he started noticing that like he would play the song that he was trying to teach me, and then during that lesson, I'd play it right back to him with like no sheet
Yeah, you're like,
music.
oh, you're just hearing this. Nice.
Yeah. So he's like, after a year or so, or a couple years, he's like, let's just go balls deep into ear
Yeah.
training. And like, I'm just not even gonna put sheet music in front of you because what's the point? Like, you learn way faster like this. You know the basics of music theory, which is all that really matters
Hmm.
for now. So yeah, I like got super into piano songwriting, and with that ear training, I started picking up other instruments again, like guitar, and I had to get straight A's for like 2 years straight so I could get a drum set. Like I was just
Oh
starting to
shit.
to expand as much as possible, and like I was just I caught the bug pretty early. So eventually, by the time I got to high school, that's when you're starting to create friend groups and you're finding more people that play music and so and so. And eventually, I just started, looking for people to play music with because I was
Hmm.
like, all right, I've done the solo thing for so long. Like, what can I do now? And so I was in like a pretty cool little psychedelic rock band in high school, and it was awesome just like being able to vibe with like all these different people after so
Right.
long, and they'd all been doing it since they were like 6 years old. So it was just like this
So y'all
crazy
are just
cool.
been around it for such a long time. You guys are probably
Yeah,
super good at it by then too.
we were killing it, and I mean
Yeah.
it was one of the most fun experiences I've had in music. But eventually, being with four other creative geniuses in that realm of music, right? Everybody is so hard headed.
Hmm.
Everybody can songwrite, even the drummer. Like, so when it came to communicating ideas to one another, that's where it was just like, oof, it was great for a year or so, or a couple years. We got to tour a little bit and see a different state in high school, which was awesome. But eventually we got back to the songwriting process, and it was just one person wanted to do this direction, another person wanted to do weird time signatures and get all big brain with our music, and then I wanted to be like Coldplay-esque, and you know what
Hey,
I mean?
Coldplay's
So
fire though. I actually just saw Coldplay last year, and it was an amazing show. So,
I
it,
bet they,
yeah,
oof, yeah, their production always goes Richter. I mean,
wild. Yeah.
it's insane. Oh man, but yeah, so like when too many, hard-hitting heads met, that's when production really took over.
Hmm.
Because now you're the drummer, bass player,
Hmm.
guitarist, vocalist, whatever you want to be. Like you have complete control. And I was always producing on the side, but I didn't really take it seriously. Especially being in bands and stuff. It was just like a cool additive to the band where it'd be like, oh, I made this stick little patch. Let's use it for this
Yeah.
song. Um, but yeah, eventually producing took over, and I started DJing in high school. That was like my side gig. So I do like the Sweet 16s and the graduation parties, and oh, my parents are out of town. Like, we only have like $50. You want to come play? I'm like,
Yeah.
hell yeah! Like, free
Sure.
booze. I'm on. you
Yeah.
know. And I would like, I would set up like pre-made 30-minute mixes so I could like go walk and talk and hang out with my friends for a
Ah,
little, and then
smart.
jump back on the decks. But eventually, doing that, I was like, damn, I'm getting bored of playing these people's music. Like,
What kind of music were you playing early on?
man, so it started with like the progressive house era because that was like
Okay.
2012 when I was a freshman in high school. So it was like a lot of Calvin Harrisy. I was into Dead Mouse, Avicii, like classic,
Hmm.
whatever. And I was super into that like lighthearted chord progression, like in your feel stuff. Eventually, one of my neighbors in the town I grew up in, he was like, "Yo, have you heard of this guy, Mr. Carmack?" And I was like, "No, what?"
Fire. So
And
good.
oh my God, and that was back when Carmack still had like 150 tracks on his SoundCloud that are just like from the cuts.
Hmm.
And he would post like two a week back then because that was the community.
Yeah, he was pumping. Yeah.
Yeah,
I
so it was
remember
just
that.
like, oh my God, this guy's output is crazy and it's this different thing. And, that led me into trap and like, really getting into the RL Grimes even and Bauer and all of that, like the festival trap shit. But I still had this like allure towards the Carmack world, like the beat maker world.
Hmm.
Um, so I kind of dove headfirst into that. But the thing about that world is like you have to develop the taste for it first. You
Yeah.
can't just like jump in and start making dope beats. Like you have to familiarize yourself with that culture and like
There's a lot. I feel like there's a lot of like nuances within the production too that
yeah,
like you kind of have to almost take note of and learn.
and every sound. I mean, the cool thing about Carmack, as opposed to the rest of the electronic music industry at that
Hmm.
point, I mean, all of the LA slash Bay Area beat scene, they were doing unique stuff, and there was a handful of other people, especially in that SoundCloud golden era, that were like pushing for their own sound, and that was like the thing that I couldn't get my finger around. Is like, how do these guys just like every time I hear a beat, I don't even have to see whose name it is. I know that's a Carmack track,
Hmm.
or I know that's a Sam Galatry track, or the
They just
sky's
have a
pretty much the
signature kind of vibe. Yeah.
exactly. So that was the
Yeah.
thing that like really was the hook that I was like, okay, I need to dive in. But like I was saying, it's very hard to just start creating those nuances and have like the subtle, they're not doing too much in the production. And
Mhm.
as a kid, you have all these tools and all these noises and samples and whatever. So you're like over complicating everything you do. Like I would be stoked when I had a track that was like 150 different layers.
Yeah.
But
Like
over
simplify
time,
it. Yeah.
yeah, you gotta like take all those things away and like,
Yeah.
left with just the meat, what I call the meat and potatoes of the track, which is just, the average human ear can only hear like four sounds at the same
Yeah.
time. And that's even generous, like a lot of people
Mhm.
are only paying attention to one or two things. And so over time with production, kind of started doing that and starting to notice like, oh, okay, I'm getting a little sound going. And yeah, I don't know. I I just kept grinding and grinding on that, and I would show my friends. They're like, "Yeah, this is pretty cool." I'd play at the parties. They're like, "Yeah, cool." Like they were supportive. Still wasn't there.
Yeah. I know you went to Icon, you graduated from
Yeah.
Icon. How long until that kinda happened from that point?
So that is kind of what I was getting to. Is like
Yeah.
I was at a standstill, and I knew what I wanted to do. I was a really good student until like my senior year, where
Senioritis.
yeah, well, I didn't have I never had money growing up or anything like that. So college was kind of out of the equation, especially the ones I wanted to go to were just it was just like, you know what? I can't I can't do this. And so I graduated high school, and that summer I just put my head down and drank 5 cups of coffee every day and just produced and produced. And my mom she would come into my room and she's like, dude, you are a fucking raccoon right now. Like, look at your eyes. Like, are you okay? Are you on drugs? And then my one of my other friends who I used to be in the band with, he had like a sick studio set up at his house. So I'd be over there until like 4 in the morning making music, and I'd come home like, just exhausted
Exhaust
and
yeah.
sleep in until two
Yeah.
or three the next day. And my mom was like, okay, you're definitely on drugs. And I'm like, dude,
I'm
no,
just
I'm not.
producing.
So what that led to was me getting kicked out of my house because I was just like, she's like, get a
Oh,
job. I'm like,
shit.
this is gonna be my job, trust me.
Yeah.
And, it's hard for a parent to see that. So she was like, you know what? I'm going to do what happened to me. I'm going to put you on your feet, figure your life out. And I was like, oh shit, okay. So since my mom and dad have never been together, I was like, oh yeah, I'll get kicked out of my house and I'll just go to my dad's and like live there for a little. But I call my dad. My whole car is packed with all of my stuff, and I'm driving up like an hour north to LA. I'm like, hey, are you still in LA? I haven't talked to you in a while. What's going on? He's like, dude, I actually just moved to Miami. So I'm
Mm.
like driving up to LA, like calling my dad, like thinking we're gonna hang out and let's stay there for a little until I get on my feet. And he's like, yeah, I'm actually trying to sublease my apartment right now so you can stay there in the meantime, but you know,
Time's ticking.
you're kind of
Yeah.
effed. So I was like, oh shit, here we go. And I go to his apartment. He's saying the same thing. He's like, you got to get a job to pay for that place, blah, blah, blah. But he goes, I know you're working on music a bunch. I can try connecting you with some of my buddies that, they were in the music industry,
Mhm.
so on and so forth. They do more like hip hop stuff and like dance crew, crump shit in LA.
Yeah. Yep.
So I got connected with one of these guys who was like their videographer, and he's, probably like 35 years older than me. These are like old heads. And he brings me to this hip hop studio where freaking Corrupt is in the booth. And I'm like, the only white kid, and I'm from like Southern Orange County, so I'm all surfed out, like tan, like,
Yeah.
what's up, bro? And I like walk in and there's like they're like railing lines over here, and I'm like all
Holy
young and
shit.
freaking
Yeah.
out. But then they're like, hey, like play us some beats. And they haven't they hadn't really heard like the up and coming electronic trap yet. Like trap was just breaking through.
Mhm.
as far as like a commercialized thing you rap over. They were still doing like G-funk type beats, like boom, boom, boom. So I showed
Yeah.
him like
That old school
140.
flow. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I
Yeah.
showed him like the 140 trap shit, and the whole studio like erupted. They're like, "What the fuck? Like you little piece of shit." So from that moment on, they were like, "Hey, just keep coming back. Like, we'll feed you. We'll, just make us beats,
hmm
and learn from this guy who he's like producing stuff for 50 Cent." So I was just like, "Holy crap, how did this happen?" Not like it was some insane studio, by the way. Like it's kind of like washed up. Nobody had money, so everybody's like, "Hey, I'll get the Little Caesars pizza today." It was like
Yeah.
a really grindy attitude, and I think I needed that, and it absolutely put me on my feet because I saw now instead of taking 2, 3, 4 days to work on a beat, I have to get one done in 15 minutes,
hmm
and boom, pump out another one. Boom, pump out another one. Um, and these guys were just so supportive of what I was doing.
Were you working for them at all? Was that like your, did that become your job, or how did that kind of work out?
No, no.
No.
So my dad was being really cool. Fortunately, like his job was okay enough for him to still take care of the apartment I was in because I told him like what
mm,
was going on, and he's always been like the one that's like freaking balls to the wall, go to your passion. And my
right.
mom's more like financially secure, like make sure you can eat.
Yeah.
And my dad was just like, you know what, fuck it, like go have fun. So I still had the apartment, and I ate at the studio whenever they got like Little Caesars pizza or something, and um, like I was the only one with my weed card back then, so I'd like go do weed runs, and if I did that, they'd let me take like 2 hits off of the blunt. Like it was this whole
Damn.
whole kind of system I had going that was just like I don't know, it worked, but it was definitely gnarly. Like I slept countless nights in the studio too, just hanging
Jeez.
out with him. Like it
Yeah.
was gnarly. Before I got kicked out of my house back home, I had done a tour at Icon with my mom
Mm.
just to be like, hey, like there is an option for me to go to a school. This one looks really rad. Um, and she kind of like forgot about it, or I don't know what was going on, but we did the whole tour, and I was like, I really want to do this. And then we saw the price, and it was just kind of like, oof, you know what I mean? Like, God,
Yeah.
that's a lot. But I was trying to say, instead of spending 60K a year at a
I was
four
gonna
year,
say, yep.
why don't we just commit this one
It's
year that I
cheaper.
know is going to help me? Yeah,
Yeah.
in that regard. Like,
It's
I
still
won't,
it's still steep, but comparative to like a 4 year, it's only a fraction of the cost. So
I'm not gonna be a
yeah.
hundred thousand dollars in debt at the end
No,
of it.
fuck that.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And
Yeah.
and I'm in and out. Like that's the thing about the scene too. It's like you want to get in ASAP, and especially when you're young, it's like an appeal. Like, oh, this
hmm
18-year-old coming up. So I kind of knew that business wise. But yeah, like I said, we forgot about it, especially when I got kicked out. I was like, all right, I'm never going to this school, right? And I kind of, when you're young, you resent your parents for that shit. So I didn't talk to my mom forever after that. So fast forward now, 5 months later, I'm in LA. I'm still making beats for these guys. Like we're now starting to get actual offers to do movie sync stuff. So I'm like, okay, I can actually get paid, and that brought this like new wave of inspiration, I guess. So I was like trying harder to get weird, trying to like still remember the Carmack side of things while making hip hop beats on the side, and
hmm
like trying to combine the two. And that's where like the nuances came from, is like constantly writing hip hop beats, which is probably what Carmack did,
Yeah.
or a lot of these other producers do. Like it trains your mind into hearing the right samples and hearing the right flow, and you structure things correctly. So I made this crazy song. It's called Windex. It was like one of the first tracks I ever released as Something Something.
Sick.
And
Does
I'm
it have anything to do with like the actual Windex product?
yeah,
Sick.
there's like a
Sick.
sample in it, or it's like
Hell yeah.
this instrument I made. I was just like kept turning a bunch of knobs, and it sounds like you're squeaking a window, like cleaning a
Nice.
window. So yeah, like I make this song and I'm showing everybody in the studio, and they're freaking out because it's just like big trap banger,
hmm
huge 808 stuff. And then I hear a knock on the studio door, and I'm like, oh shit, are we being too loud? Like we're in a production studio. Whatever. This is stupid. It's basically a building full of different production studios, right? So you can
Okay.
like rent that space per month. And this guy opens the door, and I look at him. He looks at me. We both kind of like, whoa, I know you. I'm like, you're the guy who gave me a tour at Icon like 5 months ago. He's like, yeah, yeah, bro. We heard your shit coming through the walls, and like just wanted to check out what you're doing. It sounds fire. And I'm like, oh, really? Like, yeah, check this out. Boom. And I played them the whole song. And it's this guy, Brandon. He used to do like, he was almost like a manager back then. Like he would oversee a lot of things at Icon. And he just went, dude, like, well, how come you haven't signed up yet? I remember talking to you and
Mhm.
doing that interview thing, and I was just like, dude, yeah, I told him the whole story I just told you. Like, it's been kind of hectic. He goes, well, the school's only like 3 blocks down the street. And I was like, oh shit, it is. Like, I had no idea this whole time. He's like, yeah, our studio, like, we rent this out just to like have fun, and then Icon's right there. But yeah, if you want to come in, and this was in like November ish,
Okay.
and the next time I
Start
could sign
date's
in,
January.
well, yeah, like
Yeah.
exactly. So they already have a whole class lined up for that. So they're like, sign
Nice.
up, we can put you on the waiting list, and if you're, lucky, we'll get you in January, but if not, you'll come in like April the next quarter. I'm like, okay, cool. And so at that point, I was like, what do I do? Like, I have no money for this. I don't know
Mhm.
what I'm gonna do. I haven't talked to my parents in forever. So I finally called my mom after not talking to her for months, and I'm like, hey, I want to go to this school. Like, I really, just this random universal chance of him being right next to me in the studio. Like, I have to go. Like, just please. And she was
Divine
like,
timing. You have
yeah, she
to.
goes, I've she goes, I've been waiting for you to say this since I like kicked you out of the house. Like, I wanted you to have motivation to go to one of these things. I'm like, I always wanted to go. What are you talking about? So yeah, like we made it happen, and I do my interview like a couple weeks later, and they freaking scooted me in to join in January. So I like
Sick.
skipped the fucking waiting line and got to go into the school, which was just magical. And once I got there, it was like Hogwarts for
Mhm.
producers. And a lot of people hate on the school, or they accredit the school to people's success, like, oh, you're only there because you went to Icon. And that's the thing that gets annoying, because it's like, man, there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of kids that go there
That
that don't
does.
do
Yeah.
anything. And it's maybe like a 0.1% that actually makes out and
Mhm.
can have a career, which is fucking, it's still dope that that's possible. But the thing that Icon does, they'll teach you the basics. And for a long time, since I had been producing for so long before the school, they teach to like the first denominator of somebody who had
Right.
never opened a DAW in their life.
That's where
So
I've
for
heard a lot of people talk about too. They're like, I don't even know like who are already have years of experience. Then they're already producers. So like that'd be cool. And they're like at the age that they could go to Icon, but they're like,
yeah.
I feel like I would have to relearn a bunch of shit that I don't really need to learn. So how did you kind of overcome that portion of it?
Well, I started enjoying it because as much as you think you know, you don't know.
Mm,
Like you skip over these things that, you know, you're watching tutorials and stuff, and maybe the guy who's giving the tutorial didn't explain it the right way. And I had always been using things in a way that I thought they were meant to be used, and then realized I don't know shit. And like that was the cool thing. But also at the same time, your habits that you do develop, you're like, you never went to school for, and all of a sudden they're telling you you've been doing the right thing this whole time. So that was another cool angle of it.
hmm
But the most important thing, like, of that school in general, is being around 250 like-minded individuals. And it's very seldom in any career path that you can just sit and do that. You know what I
Right.
mean? We're constantly trading feedback and sample packs, and you have this community of a bunch of people trying to strive for the same thing. And
Right.
with that, it lifted most people up, where it just felt like this home of producers, where it was just like, I'm meant to be there. And what that does to your like mental capacity of creativity and shit, like you just are nonstop creating because you're always around it. And it's just like, oh man, that guy's been sitting at the
hmm
desk for 5 hours. He's on his third cup of coffee. What am I doing? Like, I'm chatting with so and so. I need to start working. And
Waste
I'd
of time.
go
Yeah.
I go across the street to my apartment with my 3 roommates, and they're, like watching Netflix and bullshitting around. I'm like, what are you guys doing? Like, we got to get after it. But yeah, I don't know. I think the biggest thing about that school for me was just having a dedicated production schedule, you know?
right.
Because once you leave Icon, you don't
Yeah.
have the like, oh shit, okay, this is due. Okay, now I have this collab project. Oh, I need to master this track.
hmm
You're constantly on your laptop and DAW. And once I left, yeah, I was producing, but not as much.
Yeah. Right.
Like, I was producing maybe like 12 to 15 hours a day when I was going to Icon for a year straight.
That's
Like,
a
no
lot of hours.
weekends. Dude, it was just nonstop because,
Damn.
oh my God, it was just such a creative environment. You didn't want to stop.
Right.
But yeah, like eventually I left, and you get out of that schedule and you get out of that routine. It's very hard to get back into, just to motivate yourself, or, and that school gave you a reason to stay motivated.
hmm
And it wasn't like they're teaching you secret shit, everything that they teach is available online to some extent.
They package it in a very good way, though, I think.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. Oh my God, it's incredible. Like,
yeah,
if I didn't know anything about production and went to that school, I'd be so thankful. And
yeah.
that's kind of the craziest thing about it is I went in there already with a skill set. So some of the things I'm like, okay, I already know that, it's fine. Um, but like even now, looking at their school, I'm like, holy crap, you guys have a mastering room, like analog gear, learning how to use these things that like the average person just doesn't know how to
Hmm.
use.
Have you been to the new school yet? The
Hmm.
new campus? I was
That's
just
what I'm talking about.
there. I was just there a couple months ago, and they have the piano room there, the keys room there. They have all the different studios and stuff like that. That's their new. I've never went to the old building, but the new building is beautiful.
Oh, it's shit on the old building. But the
Yeah.
only thing about the old building, the only thing about the old building that's cool is like the history. You know,
Right.
like I think Thriller, Michael Jackson Thriller was recorded in there, like
Hmm.
some Pink Floyd stuff. Like it just had this old LA history. And that's why the owner of the building didn't want to give it up because they were going to bulldoze it and put some sort of franchise there like a while ago. But he decided to open up like a production school out of the building that's
Interesting.
already, basically treated for
That's dope.
production.
I've never heard that
So
part of their story. That's cool.
yeah, so when you walked into the building, you felt this weird creative energy. Like
Hmm.
it was so strange. I don't really think I felt that in any other place in my life. And like, yeah, you just wanted to create in there. And I had my apartment across the street. I would literally walk across the street just to go into Icon, sit on like a bench or a table and produce because I just liked being in that
Right.
that building. Their new building is just insane though, like
Yeah.
the money they were able to put into it, and they doubled the amount or tripled the amount of studios. And like I said, they have a full-blown mastering room
Yep.
to where you can like run your shit through analog summing, and it's just, oh man, they have leveled up a bunch, which is super cool. And that's also a great thing about going there is I can pop in whenever.
Just relating to your story of how you were, you kind of had to push it off for a few months. I've been pushing Icon off for like 2 years now. So I will hopefully, my goal, and I've been saying this since the birth of this podcast a few years ago, but my goal is next January to finally, so I'm not a producer, I'm going into business. And once I found out that they started their business program, I was like, dude, I could actually go to that school now because I saw how like much value they provided so many people and how all the big names that came out of there. Again, like you said, there's a bunch of people who come out of there and don't make it big, but they have such a good history with them, and yeah, that's awesome that you went there. I also heard in a previous interview that you did, you got kicked out of Icon.
Yeah, so I've been trying, I don't talk about that as much anymore,
Okay,
but I like diving into it. It's kind of like, I don't know if I'll get in trouble from Icon someday for saying it, but
okay.
yeah, like they're really strict about payment. And
Mm,
like I said, I don't come from money at all. It was very hard for me to even get past the first 2 months.
yeah,
My stepdad, on my mom's side, uh, he worked in the movie industry, so I had to like get a job decorating sets and stuff. And it was a great job, but you're working 15-hour days on your days off in between Icon, and it just got to be way too much. It was great
hmm,
money. I was able to afford, yeah, like 2 or 3 months of Icon through that. Just for working for like 4 weeks, I could afford 3 or 4 months of that. So it was just
nice.
like a great job, but it was too much. So I got out of that, and I was kind of like twiddling my thumbs a bit. And eventually, if you don't pay by the seventh of the month, I think they just an automatic kick you out.
Damn.
No ifs, ands, or buts. So that happened, and I was trying to, contact my parents anyway. They're like, we can't cover your rent and Icon. Like, you got to figure it
Yeah.
out. And so this one this man, I'm like 19. This dude's like 35, going to the school. He moved out from Sri Lanka. I guess he was like a huge Sri Lankan rapper out there. So super successful dude. Uh, Scientologist. Didn't know that till after, but this will make sense. And he hits me up going, "Hey, like I'm having trouble with this homework. I know you're good at this synthesis stuff. Can you help me out?" I go, "Oh, actually, man, like I got kicked out of the school. I'm not going there anymore." And he's like, "What? No, I'm gonna change that." And he goes, "So I'm starting this record label, and you
No
know,
way.
I came to Icon to like kind of scout some kids, and you're one of the people that I would like to have on the label. So instead of fronting you like record label costs, how about I just pay for
Pretty
your
cool.
tuition and you'll give me tracks?" And I was like, "What is the universe like? Yeah, done. Easy.
That's so sick.
So I freaking like signed, I gave him 10 tracks. I'm like, these are my best tracks. You can have them if you pay for the rest of the school. And he
Yeah.
goes, yeah. He's like, the only other thing is I have this studio I'm paying for outside of Icon. It's like a fully treated room. Just I want you to use it maybe 2 days a week so I get my money's worth of blah blah blah. Like I want you to like create in like a dope place. You can bring artists in there, anything you want. I'm a reclusive producer. I don't like being in studios. It makes me feel weird. I like producing on a desk with my headphones and I sit
Hmm.
like this close to my laptop. And I even did that at Icon. I'd sit in like a corner or like I said, like a bench. I'm not big into producing in studios. I am now, but I wasn't then.
Yeah.
Probably rephrase. So I'm saying all this because he paid for 1 month, paid for the second, which is like 4 grand, I think. And I was so just elated on that. And I'm thinking everything's all good. And he calls me, he's like, "Hey, can you come by my house this afternoon after, whatever session or class?" Cruise over to his house and he has
Mm.
a big stack of paper and we go into his office and we're like sitting like it's like a like doctor patient. He's on the other side of this table. I'm in this comfy chair and he's like,
What am I doing here?
and he goes, "Hey, I'm really sorry, but I'm not going to be able to keep paying your tuition. Like I said, like I wanted you to use that studio and you didn't use it once, and I don't think like you're serious about this." And I'm like, "Excuse me? Like I've made 30 tracks this week, like on my own doing. I didn't have to do it in the studio. I'm still working." And he's like, "Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't think this is going to work." So after 2 months, so I think I'm like halfway through the year now. I think it's like around June. But I get kicked out again because he didn't pay that
Right, because he
month,
stopped.
and I'm sitting there twiddling my fingers. And at this point, the school is like, "Yeah, dude, like nothing we can really do. Sorry." And I'm just so bummed. My
Mm.
my best friend just got accepted into Icon. He's like a year younger than me, and when we were in high school, I would kind of like show him production stuff because he was like just starting to get into it. And then push comes to shove, he kind of was like doing the same thing. Like, "Oh, I want to go to Icon too. That's what my best friend's doing. CJ seems to be liking it, so I'm going to sign up and do it." He gets in. This kid, he's pretty well off. Like his family has had money for generations, so it's like it wasn't an issue to him. But as he gets in, he wanted to be going to the same school as me, and he goes, "Holy shit, dude, you're not in Icon anymore. Like I just got in." I'm like, "No." Told him the same thing I just told you about parents couldn't help me, and then this guy who said he could, now he can't help me. I'm not going to find a job that's going to pay me that much money.
Yeah.
Like I'm too young. I have no experience. Uh, so I'm like, "Yeah, but enjoy it. Like it's a fun school." He goes, "Hold on." He hits up his dad, and then his dad covered the rest of the year, 6 months upfront
What?
to Icon. And Icon wasn't going to let me in, but he literally gave them the rest of the year. And they were kind of like, "Well, we're not
Okay.
going to have another problem. So, okay."
Yeah.
And yeah, it's just like to this day, I'm still incredibly, incredibly, incredibly blessed to have had those situations happen and be able to finish the school.
Seems like your whole life has just been like you were supposed to do music, bro. Like from a young age, you were interested in it, and then all through school, like it happened for you, and it seemed like you were just like you were supposed to be doing exactly what you're doing now.
Yeah, I freaking hope so. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, oh man, but yeah, that's the thing is, I think I just followed the passion. I think for every human being,
Hmm.
like that's the thing. I'm lucky enough to have found one. Some people don't get pushed in that direction, and as a young kid, like I said, I kind of was. I was surrounded by music at a very, very young age. I fell in love with it.
Yeah.
Not a lot of people were going to Warp Tour when they were 4 years old, but it's just it's a hard thing these days for people to figure out what they want to do. It's a
Yeah.
weird landscape, and I'm just stoked to have been able to have something, because it's therapeutic at the same time. Like
Hmm.
music has been a lifeline
Yeah.
for me for a long, long time. So yeah, it's just cool to still be doing it, and hopefully I can grow and keep doing it forever. So
Yeah. Hell yeah. I
yeah.
know kind of you were saying how music's been kind of a lifeline for you, and I know you're somewhat of like a mental health advocate. What have you done as far as like your mental health? And obviously you just said music is one of those lifeline things for you, but outside of music, what are some things that you do to like work on your mental health?
Oh god, it's as simple as being a human, like it's a simple
Hmm.
thing to say, just be a human, but not a lot of people do that enough.
Yeah.
And especially noticing my peers and I kind of like broke through in the scene a little bit before a lot of my, surrounding friends. And
Mhm.
you see like this chaos and stress and this, oh, I have writer's block and the pressure to make it and cross that line to where you're getting booked and you're making this your job. Um, it's important to just shut all of this shit off and
Mhm.
go do something. Like the classic touch grass thing is going around right now, but I think it's more than that.
Yeah.
It's like, you really have to focus on just your being. Like you're here on this floating rock, right? Like this is just the most random situation. Don't waste all of your time in life stressing, you know?
Yeah.
Like this pressure and stress, it builds up and it makes it harder to write music and makes it, makes you come off like a dick in green rooms. And it's just like this thing that you have to realize. Like, I didn't realize for the longest time I burnt myself out because, like I was saying, I was
It's
doing
so easy to
15-hour
burn yourself
days.
out, and with the
Oh
pressure
my
especially, yeah, it's so fucking easy to burn yourself out in this industry.
Yeah, and I let go of things that I was enjoying as a kid, like as simple as video games or like
Mhm.
going and surfing. I live in California, so I shut that off for like 6 years. I didn't surf. That was one of my first passions, like I wanted to be a pro surfer.
Yeah, yeah.
So I started doing that more. I started like going on walks. I started calling my family more and just being a human and living and like not trying to compete or be in the rat race, take a
Mhm.
step back. Because it gets out of hand. And sometimes for me at least, like I gained a bunch of weight one year because I was under so much pressure of feeling like I was falling off after having like a big upswing and started drinking my face off and like, just treating myself like shit and went into this really, really, really dark hole that I don't wish any musician or any of my friends or anybody wanting to do this gets into. But all I'm saying is it's easy to get wrapped up in this,
Mhm.
but it's even easier to just let yourself go
Yeah.
and enjoy life and hang out with your friends you haven't seen in a while. Like don't put 150% into your music career. You have
Mhm.
to go out and live because at the same time, to write good music, you need good experiences behind it or bad
Yes.
experiences. Doesn't need to be good, but you need experience, right? You need to see the world. You
Yes.
need to like freaking just go outside and, remember maybe why you're here in the first place. Is it strictly are you a vessel to make music or are you here to be alive and
Be
have a
human, yeah.
human
Yeah.
experience? Yeah. So that's kind of like a big thing I try to like put subconsciously in my music.
Mhm.
Uh, the feeling and like pulling on emotions and heartstrings like that. Um, I don't talk about it publicly too much because I'll end up ranting forever and
Yeah.
ever and ever and ever. But
That's
yeah,
how I
it's
am here
just
with mental health. Like, just
yeah.
get on the freaking I love talking about it as well. What are some of the things that you do? Do you, like, meditate or do you journal or what are some of your tools?
Yeah, so meditation's a big one.
Yeah.
It took a while to learn how to meditate properly
Dude, when people
because
are throwing around that term, when I before I started, I was like, what doesn't even make sense? You sit there with your eyes closed for like 10 minutes, like I don't understand what that does. And then now that I've done
right.
it, I'm like, oh, it makes so much more sense.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's just I got lucky the first time I did it, and one of my friends, we were in Big Sur, which is like one of the most beautiful places
Hmm.
in California. It's like redwoods and all that next to the ocean, and we were sitting on this creek, and he was like, "Have you ever meditated before?" His family was kind of like more hippie-esque. I was like, "No, not really." He's like, "All right, well, let's go sit on these rocks in the middle of the creek, and just sit down, close your eyes, and think of everything. Like think of anything bothering
Yeah.
you and just imagine it going into the river and flowing away. And you basically end up going clear, like
Hmm.
it's Scientology. But uh, no, it's just like the first time that happened, and I was literally just sitting there with no thought in the now, right? Like there's no time existing. And when you feel that, like truly, it's magical. You're like aligned actually with this universe. It feels like
Hmm.
you are one with everything else. Classic cliches. I cannot stop with those, but it's true. And like once you have that clear mind, instead of asking, like that's a big thing about praying versus meditating. Like praying is more like
Oh, dude, I was
sitting
literally
in.
just talking to my roommate about this the other day. Yeah, yeah, the difference, but like they're so similar too at the same time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think praying is more asking and meditating is listening. So
Hmm.
it's like when you're in prayer, you're, I would really like this would be awesome if I could have this, or I need help with this. And
Right.
then the meditation is like these thoughts will just enter out of nowhere from the ether. And that's kind of
Hmm.
a great, great, reset. but yeah, meditation's huge, and a lot of like very, very successful people in music, outside of music, everywhere, they do
Yeah.
it because
Yeah.
eventually, when you're trying to attain success, you get really busy, you get really overwhelmed with all this stuff. You need a break. Um, and yeah, there's multiple ways to do it, right? Like Icon taught not even meditation, but kind of a way to clear your mind is just like sit and draw a mandala, right? And
Interesting.
start with the center and just keep going and just let your mind create. Don't think too hard about it and just fill the whole entire page
Hmm.
with like this geometric pattern, right? And then my buddies Ben and Dylan, they go by like dot
Oh
dot.
yeah. Yeah. Yep.
Ben, one of the main dudes from it, he was like, yeah, after you do that, then burn it. Like do all this stuff mindlessly, not for like the end product, but just for the fact of you
Yeah.
drawing this thing, then yeah, just burn it, get rid of
Get
it.
rid of it.
Or you could journal and do the same thing.
Hmm.
Throw it away the second you're done, as long as you just like have
Purge,
this.
basically.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's kind of one of my biggest things. I'm not too strict on it like I used to be, because I'll be straight up like right before Icon as well. I took a heroic dose of psychedelics
Oh
and
shit.
that, like yeah, it, like, kinda shot put me to, like, this other way of thinking, and it was extremely easy to meditate after that because I would just, like, get into that zone that I
Hmm.
felt on LSD or whatever.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that's for everybody, I'm not advocating, but
Yeah.
it definitely helped me out in understanding, like, my part in this whole equation.
Going back to like you feeling pressure and stuff, I know we all do in this industry, when especially when we're trying to attain success and we haven't gotten it yet. But something that you mentioned before the interview, the struggle of you trying to consistently like one up yourself after you release something that has like popped off and like went you know had some big numbers. Can you explain kind of your struggle with that and kind of how you've learned to overcome that? I know that's
Yeah,
probably linked it kind of to the whole mental health thing we were just talking about.
a little bit,
Yeah.
but this is more personal, like, and not
Yeah.
as broad. Like, personally, it hurts when, I mean, I basically created this sound, right? This like signature thing.
Hmm.
And it did really well for myself in this era that that sound was popping off, like experimental trap shit. And the first thing that started kind of getting to me was people mimicking that sound and like creating success through it. And I would see these people playing way more shows than me, even though they were in my DMs 5 months earlier, being like, "How do you
Yeah.
make this sound?" Only for them to like replicate it and go tour off of it.
Right.
And that shit fucked me up for a couple years. On top of that, you know, it got us so much saturation of that same sound, and I released a sample pack, and that was like the death of me. I should never have done that, but everybody started using like even just straight raw audio clips that I put in the sample pack,
Hmm.
and it was just like I could only hear carbon copy versions of myself. So when I tried to get away from that, I noticed that my fan base was kind of not allowing me to change in that regard. And that was the way I was thinking, like, oh, like they won't let me evolve into this next thing because I wanted to
Hmm.
get away from that signature sound. I was like, okay, well, now that everybody sounds like this, I want to freaking move over here
So
and
you
stay
still
10
have a
steps.
unique sound. Yeah.
Yeah. And just like, I saw a few things on Reddit, like, oh, we missed the old something something, like the ignorant, blippy, atonal trap shit. And, you
Hmm.
know, now I'm trying to put more of my musical background into my stuff and add just more feeling and emotion instead of just like, oh, you're effed up at a music festival and want to hear trippy noises, you know,
Yeah.
like that's cool
Yeah.
too. Trust me, I love
Yes.
making weird stuff. That's why producing so cool. You can make any noise you want. But there's got to be like that, for me at least, like I have to be therapeutic with it and let those emotions come through my songs. And so yeah, that's one part. And then yeah, I made this song. It's like my magnum opus, I guess. But I made this song called "Bloom," and it's still one of my favorite songs I've ever made. Just the
Hmm.
way it was written, the flow of the track, the transitions. It was one of these things too where I woke up in the morning and I'm sitting next to my girlfriend in bed, and I'm like, "Hey, I'm so sorry, but I have this song in my head, and I have to make it happen. Like, I'm not gonna be able to hang out today. I'm not gonna say a word to you. Probably.
Leave
I'm
me, Mia.
just
Leave me alone. I'm locking myself in my room.
Pretty much. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly that. And I in 24 hours came out with the song Bloom and it was just so natural. And it was this thing and it kind of was the first song that like huge people were playing. I think Troyboi like still plays it today and it was like
Fire.
made four or
Love
five
Troyboi.
years ago. So, you know, you have these huge people playing your song all over every festival and I'm like, hell yeah, this is awesome. But what happened in
Hmm.
production is I was like, okay, now I need to make another one of those because it did so well. And this is the one-upping yourself pressure that starts to deteriorate on your natural creativity. So like
Yeah.
instead of letting like that song, when I made it, it flowed out of me. It was just this thing. I can't now then sit in a session and go, I need to make another one of those because that would just take away the flow. It's not coming through me naturally. I'm
Right.
like consciously making a decision now to sound like this one song. So there's like a few that
And in a
tried to
way, you're
mimic it.
blocking yourself off almost when you are trying to force yourself. Yeah.
Yeah, and so
Yep.
I released this song that was kind of like the second version of it. It's called Home. It's still out. Um, and it just didn't do as well. It like kind of
Mm.
flopped, and I felt like it flopped. And then I kept getting in this weird mindset of like, well, fuck, if I can't make a bloom, I got to make a hit. Like, I got to make a song because, now you're making money off your career. You're kind of touring. You're like, I need to stay in the limelight.
Right.
And that just ruins the production. It makes it not fun anymore because now you're writing for the sake of the end product. What am I going to
Mm.
get if I write this song? Versus, I love making music. I'm going to open my laptop and whatever happens, happens. That's how you make good songs. You know what I mean? And I completely shut that off. I was trying to manipulate a record. And I tried that for a couple years until finally I was like, I'm not having fun with this. Like,
Yeah.
I need to have fun again. So I just started, one day I'd write like a Tame Impala beat, like nothing to do with electronic music. I'd only use like full drum kits, and I would imagine, okay, I have five instruments, right? So I got to make a song out of these five instruments, and I
Yep.
would play
Yep.
around with that and make a house beat, or I'd make like a super long orchestral Hans Zimmer style intro, or I started having fun again. But yeah, I don't know. Like, I think the pandemic too was a great reset as far as just like what I'm doing, why I'm doing it. Um, and yeah, it's not to one up my previous self. It's I do this because I love it. I was born to do this, and I just need to keep going without thinking about the end goal. And that's where like the natural greatness comes out of writing music.
Has experiencing and going through that changed the way that you've looked at making music at all, or is there a newfound love for like making new things and creating new things?
It's not a newfound love. It's more of like
Okay.
a newfound hatred. That's a strong word, but I don't. You get into the music industry and then you see what's really going on behind the scenes, and like
Hmm.
you see some stuff that's less than savory, and like now I'm just reminded like, oh, I do this for the music. I don't do this for the industry. Like that's it. I've always loved music. The thing is, the music industry kind of started making me hate music. But I'm like, no, I don't hate music. I don't like the industry. That's the thing I don't like.
Yeah.
And that's kind of why I've stayed a little bit underground. And I like it here. I like the freedom, and like, I can't keep expecting things. So I think
Hmm.
that's where it's, just creating this dichotomy. It's like I just need to remind myself I love music and not the BS.
Yeah. Well, we'll try and wrap up here, but before we wrap up, is there anything else you'd like to get out there? What's kind of the future of what's to come for you and your project?
So a lot actually.
Sweet.
With with writing and going on these journeys of like, oh, now I'm doing this Hans Zimmer thing and blah blah blah, and
Hmm.
doing all these different styles. I fell into one that I really like, and I think that style is deserving for like a whole new alias. So
Sweet.
I'm thinking next year, not sure when,
Second
when the music
project.
is when the music is right. Yeah, second project. I've been working on it for a while, probably like 2 or 3 years, but it's starting to get to a place where I'm like, wow, I really like this other side of myself. Maybe call it
What
something
can you
else, but
can yeah, that'd be sick actually. Can you
uh,
hint at like what style of music it's gonna be, or do you not want to give it that away yet?
um, it would be like the angel to the demon. Something something's like harder, heavy
Okay.
hitter, banger. This
Yeah.
would be more like light-hearted live show, actually playing instruments and
Sweet.
stuff, and just pouring my heart into the songwriting aspect of things, and maybe start singing on some tracks. I don't know. We'll see. I've already had a,
Awesome.
a couple trials and errors, and then at the same time, gonna do a Something Something album, and probably tour on
Excellent.
that early next year. So two albums, two kind of alter egos, and it'll be fun to work on both of those at the same time because I'm sure they'll kind of like join worlds in some
Mm-hmm.
forces. Like in between the banger moments of that album, there'll be like pretty moments, and then in the prettier album, there'll be like little bits of sound design and cool moments there. So
Awesome.
yeah,
Sweet.
very
I'm
excited
excited.
to launch both of those.
Very cool. Is it still going to be under the bass music stuff? Is it still going to be like experiment? Or is it going to be more like it's just going to be completely like separate from your bass music stuff?
It's going to be completely separate.
Okay, cool.
I don't want to be in I don't want them to be in the same world at all.
Yeah, yeah.
So like I like the bass music world, and then this is going to be more like, I don't know, summertime daytime sets, or like being able, like
Got it.
my biggest dream is traveling to like dope ass countries, like go to Croatia, and the thing about those European or like other world type
Mm-hmm.
countries, they like a different style of music. Like they're not too into that crazy like wompy bass music,
Yeah.
Some parts are, but they just like a vibe, they want to chill. And there's artists like Duskus right now, or Pocket, or
I know Pocket.
Overmono,
Yeah.
and so like that's kind of the lane that I'm thinking
Okay.
about going in,
Very cool.
and
Do you
have been
do you
working on.
s- do you see yourself continuing both in the
Yeah,
far future? Okay, cool.
absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think it's also like a commitment towards just saying like I'm gonna be in this, and I'm gonna put every second of it. And,
Mm-hmm.
because sometimes I'll make a mellow song and I'm like, this can't be released under something something. It needs a home. And that's kind of like where the idea started. It's like, well, I'm not gonna make that stuff just because it's not
Yeah.
on brand or whatever. But yeah, it's just I want to be able to create whatever I want whenever, and so I need
Perfect.
two homes for that kind of
Mm-hmm.
situation.
Perfect. Perfect. Well, is there
Yeah.
anything else that's coming up that you're excited about that you'd like to get out there for everyone?
Yeah, on the 21st of April, I'm playing in Boston, doing direct support for Chi. That's gonna be a dope
Oh,
one. It's a
cheese fire.
yeah, it's gonna be a 360 show, so we're probably gonna be going pretty damn heavy.
Those are
Um,
popping up now, like way more than they
yeah,
used to. 360 shows are like the thing right now.
they're
That's
so
dope.
fun. Yeah. And then 2 weeks after that, playing in Columbus, Ohio on May 12th with Floret Loret, very talented
Hey,
dude. So yeah, those are just a couple shows coming up, and yeah, stay tuned. I'll be releasing music probably next month. Got some fun stuff planned, so yeah.
awesome. Where can the listeners keep up to date with those things? Where can they follow you on social medias?
Okay, Instagram is something, Sumthin dot something, same exact spelling. Twitter
Mm-hmm.
is at something music, and Facebook is something dot something as well, same as Instagram. But yeah, you
Perfect.
can find everything on there. There's links to, tickets and music and whatever on all socials. So yeah.
Perfect. Yeah. Last final question. I ask this at the end of every single interview. There's one piece of advice you could give yourself when you first started, realizing that music was your calling and you really wanted to start pursuing it as your career. What would that be?
Once you attain success, don't put your foot off the gas pedal.
Yeah.
Just because you're starting to gain traction doesn't mean you need to work less. It actually means you need to work twice as
Lean
hard.
fucking and more. Yeah.
Yep,
Yeah.
exactly. I wish somebody told me that when I was younger, man. But yeah, keep that foot on the gas pedal.
Thank you so much for your time today, man. This has been awesome. Thank you
Yeah.
guys so much for watching this week's episode. If you enjoyed it, drop us one of these and subscribe to make sure you never miss out on any of our new episodes. If you want to find out more information about our guests, you can find all their information down in the description. Have a wonderful week.